Richard Teasdale. I'm an English actor and I have been interviewed on the Keith Andrew Network. So if you want to find out about the early days of my acting career, then tune into the Keith Andrew Network. It's across all social media. I look forward to seeing you there.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Keith Andrew Network. This is episode 1032. That is right, 1032 on the one and only Keith Andrew Network. Here's a good friend from overseas. As you heard from a recommendation, he already introduced himself. But the first thing I want to talk to you about is our top 15 questions. So the first question I want to ask you is, tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Okay then, right. Well, my name is Richard. Well, my real name is Richard Nunn, but my stage name is Richard Teasdale, which is named after my late grandfather, because he had 4 sisters and 2 daughters. So essentially, when he died, his surname died with him. And as I got more and more acting work, I realised that actually having a little bit of anonymity is quite good. And so I was thinking, racking my brains how to do this. So I thought, I shall both honour my late grandfather, who I was very close to, and also protect my current family as well by having a stage name. So I'm Richard Teasdale. I am 50 years old. I did come back to professional acting quite late because I got into acting when I was 17 and I was at sixth form college. Now, just to sort of do a bit of conversion from a British system to the American system, sixth form college is kind of like high school because you go there from the age of 16 to 18 and you get the qualifications that allow you to go to university. So it's very much like high school, but slightly later. And I got into drama there. I was on my 17th birthday and I'm afraid I was actually rather drunk when it happened. I was studying completely different subjects, and on my birthday, while slightly tipsy, after having a few too many drinks, a friend of mine said, "Richard will do that." And I went, "Yes, I shall do." And of course, next day I found I just signed up for the college play, which was "Oh, What a Lovely War." Of course, I thought, wow, what have I got myself into here? It's a musical. I can't sing, I can't dance, I've never really tried acting. And I love it. I found I loved it. As they say, I got bitten by the bug. And Oh, What a Lovely War being an ensemble piece where you played multiple roles. One of the ongoing jokes was that when the director said, "We need someone to play," I'll put my hand up and say, "Yes, me, I'll do that." And so it kind of became a bug. I started studying it. Fast forward a couple of years and I went to university. And I actually got my first professional gig the week before I went away. Now, this was back in 1993. And what was then called the Discovery Channel, which later became the History Channel today, had a series of British-based drama documentaries. And this particular one was called The Gunpowder Treason and Plot, which is about the failed attempt by Catholics to blow up King James I in 1605. And it happened around this area I'm in. I live here in the Midlands, literally the very middle of England. And the city I live in is Birmingham, which is Britain's second city. And in the rural parts around here was where the actual gunpowder plotters were based, and they actually were able to film on some of the locations that were still around. I played one of the plotters. And then after that, I went to university where I was studying drama and history up in Lancaster, which is right up in the northwest of England. And with this company, I got another professional job, this time playing Kings and Queens of England. Now, it's a king that's probably one of the more famous kings to Americans, in fact, because it's King George III, i.e. the one who was in charge and ruled over America when you achieved independence. So there's a nice little link there to America. And I studied for a while. And I got a few jobs doing acting. My very first job on a big set was in 1994 on a film called First Night, which is a Arthurian tale that starred Sean Connery, Julia Ormond, and Richard Gere, and also the late John Gielgud. And I was being an extra, and I had absolutely no idea what to do on a big film set, because suddenly I'd gone from a film set where there were a maximum of 7 people plus crew to one in a massive crowd scene where there were 200. It was all night. Of those 200 extras, 60 were mounted on horses. We were carrying these huge iron braziers which were lit up with flames. And because of that and health and safety, every single shot took 40 minutes to set up. They had to extinguish all the flames, check us all out, every single one of us, relight the fires. And that was that was an experience for a then 20-year-old. Now, the chap who got me this job was a man called Jim Bisgood, who I knew from before. He used to reenact battles. Jim's main role was that he was a period folk musician, and he'd specialised in songs from the 16th and 17th century. So he played many, many instruments. He learned a new one every year. Now, Jim also used to work for an acting agent, so he wasn't quite my agent, but he'd get me the extra work, and he understood how acting went. Now, he made a good point at the time. He said, the thing is, Rich, with your look, you're probably not going to get cast till you're 40. But when you are cast, past the age of 40, you'll be cast a lot. And of course, rather like a lot of 20-year-olds, I was a little bit crushed by this. But I kind of saw his points, because there weren't a lot of rather short, stout men with bad, at that time, strange it may seem now, I had bad curly hair and lots of it too. And there weren't a lot of roles opportunities for that. And of course, eventually when I got my degree, I dropped off acting for a while, even amateur acting. Again, I have to think American, not British.
That's fine. I actually prefer you if you speak British.
Okay, fair enough then. Yes, amateur acting. It's like community theatre. I even dropped off that for 9 years, and basically it was actually rather depressing time, because you realise that when you've actually been bitten by the acting bug, that you should carry on in some form, because it's just good. Otherwise, it's bad for your mental health. And eventually I got back into it through a friend of mine from my youth theatre days, called Steve. And he got me back into it with a production of Fiddler on the Roof, which I did like. Now,
you were mentioning about you worked with Sean Connery, and then you mentioned you were going to talk in English, but I told you to talk as you normally talk, and that's where we left off.
That's right, yes. So I got back into amateur dramatics for a few years, and we did one show a year. It was musical theatre, because it was a musical theatre society. And I liked it, and it was actually quite nice, because amazingly I learned how to dance. And the choreographer was this rather lovely old lady who was very experienced and worked in the industry professionally herself. And she encouraged me to learn how to dance, because I thought I had a block in my head. I thought, I'm 31, I'm over 300 pounds in weight. I can't possibly dance. I'm too old to start this thing. She said, no, darling, don't worry. And she just showed me a very basic step and went, oh, I'll try that, shall I? Yes. Oh, yes, you're right. It does work, doesn't it? Yes. Because luckily I had a background in martial arts as well, which, fun enough, does translate well into learning how to dance, which is a good thing. So I did a few shows with them. And kind of the high points was in 2008 then. We did a performance of Oklahoma. Now, until then, I've been playing very sort of light characters who are very fluffy, what you'd expect from a musical, really. And I kind of missed the really dramatic, edgy characters, which I've done at university. And of course, the opportunity to play Judd Fry came up. And I thought, I'm going to go for Judd because he's got some fantastic songs. He's a complex character. And there's a bit of grit there. And so I did the audition, and people were surprised because they thought, oh, Richard's just sort of nice and cuddly and friendly. He can't play those roles. And then they went away terrified. I've got a friend, and even now she says, who played Laurie, and she said, I'm still terrified of you when you look like you're playing Judd. And that's 15 years down the line. And people were surprised. And I choreographed my first fight scene since 1994. No, 1995, I tell a lie. And I had to do it to music as well, in the ballet scene in Oklahoma. And I thought, wow, I actually quite enjoyed this. This was a real challenge. Now, the choreographer I mentioned earlier, at the end of the production, and I've been with the Society now, it's my fifth show, the fourth or fifth show of the Society, she said, now, darling, here's the thing. You really ought to think about going professional, you know. And I thought, that's a good idea. Then my brain thought, how do I do this? I had no idea how to get back into the professional world. And so I prevaricated like you do. And I, kind of procrastinated. And I did another show with them. But then my mum found in the newspaper an advert for Birmingham University Shakespeare Institute, which is in Stratford-upon-Avon. And it was to study a master's degree in Shakespeare and theatre. And I thought, maybe that's a good idea. It's in Stratford. It's about Shakespeare. I've done one Shakespeare before and I've quite enjoyed it. And, well, let's try it. I still didn't know at the time that in England, like most things in England, there's almost like a class system, even within the training for actors. Going to university to study drama or to study theatre does not necessarily train you to be an actor. It'll give you some acting training, but it doesn't guarantee proving you're a trained actor. For that, you have to go to a drama school. Now, Britain has got many famous drama schools. RADA, for example, Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, famous for having people like Laurence Olivier having gone there. Bristol Old Vic, famous for Peter O'Toole, so on and so forth. I didn't realise at the time, which I should have done, that getting a master's degree from a regular university in what turned out to actually be English literature was not the same thing as going to a specialist acting school. But when I was there, and I was doing it part-time because my grades weren't good enough to be accepted on the full-time course to start off with. Of course, being in Stratford-upon-Avon is a very small town. It has 27,000 people in it. You can cross the entire town on foot in 20 minutes. It's a tiny place with a surprisingly large number of famous people living there at any one time. So at the time, for example, Ian McKellen had just done King Lear. David Tennant had just done Richard II and Hamlet and so on and so forth. And there were many other people there as well. David Bradley, for example, who's famous for being in Game of Thrones and so on and so forth, was a known figure there. So you got to see a surprising amount of famous people in a very tiny town because of having the world's most famous theatre. And the Royal Shakespeare Company put up an advert around town showing it's 2010 because they were still using paper in their pinning its notice boards. And they were looking for people to be in an advert for their 50th anniversary because the Swan Theatre had been redone. It had had a facelift, and it was they wanted to have an advert to do this. So what they wanted to do, they wanted a group of people to dress up in the Royal Shakespeare Company's costumes and basically show them off. And the idea is we're all coming home, we're going back to the theatre. So we're walking across the Bancroft Gardens. And I was actually in two scenes. First of all, they dressed us all up as medieval knights in black. And I got a sword in my hand. And they started noticing me because of my background fight training. I'm actually pretty good with a sword, and they noticed this. And so for the next scene, they dressed me up. They had Romans this time, and they dressed me up as a Roman centurion, which this look really suits. So I've got a nice big spear, brown breastplate, red. And I thought, this looks really cool. And they really liked it because I actually showed them how to march. Because my reenactment days, I could show them how to march in sequence and so on and so forth. They went, yeah, that's really good, that is, Richard. And the next day they did a kind of eclectic mix of costumes. Now, they literally had the equivalent of emptying out their costume box and throwing it on the floor and saying, you have this, you have that, you have the other. And they kept me as Roman centurion, said, we really like that look on you, so you're being that. I went, yes. And this little advert was done, which was narrated by Patrick Stewart, who's one of my heroes. And it was saying about how the Royal Shakespeare Company was reopening. And from that, it sort of went from there. It turns out at the Shakespeare Institute, there was a girl studying a research degree who was also working for ZDF, which is the German state broadcaster, rather like the German version of the NPR or the BBC. She was German herself, and they were doing a documentary on the life of William Shakespeare, or so we were told. And she asked if I wanted to play Richard Burbage, which is Shakespeare's first lead actor. And that was all rather good fun because I was in quite a few scenes. And they got these fantastic costumes, again from the RSC, where I thought, wow, I actually look quite good in these. This is cool. Probably the funniest moments was that they wanted to show a play being performed before Elizabeth I. And so we chose Romeo and Juliet. They had the amusing thing of me at 37 wearing a wig to be like Richard Burbage, having a sword fight as between Romeo and Tybalt. I was the least common Romeo. They even said that in the translation. Yeah. They even said, yes, back then, of course, Romeo does not look like we'd think Romeo would do now. And I thought, yeah, thanks. And of course, it's also original practices. So they had a young teenage boy playing Juliet. And no one had told him he has to get kissed by me. So we ended at this wonderful sort of kissing scene in front of the Queen, where you can see this clearly terrified 18-year-old lad. And if you look closely, the girl who got me the job, who then became my girlfriend at the time, she's playing one of the Queen's ladies in waiting, and it actually zooms very quickly onto her, and she's absolutely laughing her socks off at this whole sort of absurd scene that was going on in front of her. And from that, I thought, yeah, I want to get into this properly. So again, I prevaricated. I ended up doing some dinner theatre, which is common to both of our countries. In this case, we're doing murder mysteries. And that was upon a steam train in the Gloucester and Warwickshire Steam Railway. I did several of those. And then finally I thought, right now, how do I move on from here? Now, social media, of course, is a boon. This is how we met, of course, Keith. We met through Facebook. And so I looked and went, are there any group for Midlands actors? And sure enough, there's Midlands actors and extras. And I thought, yeah, that kind of sounds like it should be for actors and extras. So I went on there. And I did a music video, which was a lot of fun. I recommend to anyone who wants to be an actor, do a music video. They're the most fun ever because you've always got music playing in the background. Sort of all part of it. The day goes by wonderfully quickly, and there's a really, really good vibe when doing a music video. I'm doing another one on Wednesday, in fact. And from there, I did a few more short films. I got known on the independent circuit. And I thought, well, what next? I thought, aha, go for an extras agency. Now, in the meantime as well, following the Shakespeare Institute, I'd gone and got my stage fighting qualification. I learned 3 levels with a British company, which taught me how to use every kind of sword going, as well as the quarterstaff and wrestling. And I even found time to get an American qualification from the SAFD, the Society of American Fight Directors, from a chap who was over here from America. And me and him, just for fun, because he was here with his wife studying her master's degree. He was a bit bored during the day. So me and him we used to make up fight scenes. And in the end, there was another gentleman there, another American chap. And he was getting his renewed. And so I was asked to actually partner him in his fighting. And this guy Mike said, well, why don't you also apply for yours? You've had enough one-on-one instruction with me to apply for that. So I thought, yeah, great, I'll get my American fight qualification as well. So I did both of those. And I went to an extras agency. And there's a film going on called Top Dog, which is still on Netflix, in fact, which is about that wonderful part of British culture, football hooligans. and I turned up there in this pub in London. It was actually a pub that was about to be demolished. And we were actually having a part of that. We were actually demolishing the pub from the inside as well. So it's all quite meta. And the stunt coordinator comes out and says, is there anyone here with fight experience? I went, yes, me. He looked at me, saw how big I was. I'm wearing a black leather jacket. He goes, okay, what level? Level 3. Okay. So that's roughly what they need. I've got my pads with me as well, because I always carried them around. And to side note for anyone who gets into acting, bring knee pads. Buy knee pads that you can wear underneath your jeans or your trousers. Because if you turn up on set and you've got knee pads, they're more likely to say, yes, come and do some fight stuff. And yeah. So we did that. And it turns out I'm fighting a main character, an actor called Leo Gregory. And we spent 6 hours rehearsing one single fight scene. He's playing a football hooligan going to a pub. He smashes, very simple, smashes a pool cue, breaking a load of bottles, which go off like a rocket. And then he jumps onto a pool table, smashes the cue over his knee, and I go to attack him, and he smacks for the cue. I go down, him and his mate kick me in the back. A lot of fun. And yeah, 6 hours practice for a maybe 30-second fight scene. And yeah, we all had a lot of fun. There was a old gentleman there as well who'd never done this before, and he's this very inoffensive looking man. He's about 70, and they say, do you want to get thrown through a window? And he said, oh God, yes please, that'd be so cool. So they get these two great big massive lads with muscles, and they drag him out of his seat, and they throw him through the sugar glass window, which again just obliterates everywhere. And at the end, he had this massive smile on his face. He said, that was so much fun. So from there, I took acting classes with a local acting teacher called Tracy Street. Tracy's a wonderful actor and director. And she taught us Meisner technique, which is a fantastic way of acting because you react to your circumstances rather than necessarily say it's going to be like this. I have to be in character all the time. So no. You act as yourself. Now, famous actors in Meisner technique include Gregory Peck, Tom Cruise, Robert Duvall, James Franco, Sandra Bullock. And we're told that they don't tend to want to win Oscars, but they do tend to be the people who are best to work with because they're very easygoing. They just naturally react as to how they feel at the time. And it changes even between takes, and that's okay too. It's all about being honest. It's fantastic. And from her, I got my first professional play experiences. She was hired by the Diocese of Birmingham and the Bishop of Birmingham to put on a play in Birmingham Cathedral called A Passion for Birmingham. It's part of the medieval traditions of passion plays, which talk about the last 24 hours of Jesus Christ's life. And they sort of brought me in to be fight captain. And they decided that they even gave me an extended part that's not quite in the Bible, which is the man who's in charge of all the people who kills Jesus, who's also the guy who tempts Judas. And they sort of had a whole lot of different aspects in. We made it modern day. And we did it 3 years in a row. Through there, I met another gentleman who became a very good friend of mine called Mike Bauer, who was a fight choreographer. And through him, I also worked with his company. And we did pantomime. Now, panto is a great British tradition. That's also, it's quite hard to explain to Americans because it's so ingrained in British culture, we know what it is. And nobody else on earth knows what it is. But it's sort of stock characters, usually from fairy tales, usually from well-known things. And this is the fun part, trying to explain panto. So you say, normally there's a main character. Right, okay. and he's usually a man. Okay, fine. Who's usually played by a woman. Right. And she's obviously a woman. Okay. And there's a female lead who's also a woman. Right. But then there's also what's called the panto dame, which everyone comes to see. Okay. What's that then? It's a man dressed as a woman. Yeah. Usually clearly a man. The larger and more bearded they are, the better it is. And they've got a falsetto voice on. And by this point, everyone starts looking at you and say, what is this? It's got its roots in Commedia dell'arte from Italy. It's very similar to some of the Venetian plays you get if you're walking around there, where everyone's wearing these obvious masks, which suggest certain characters, and everyone knows those stock characters. It's the same with Britain, except the audience participation here is if somebody says, I'm going to do such and such, the audience comes back with, oh, no, you're not. Oh, yes, I am, says the person. Oh, no, you're not. Oh, yes, I am. And it's something that everybody in Britain knows, and everybody else looks as if to say, we've gone totally crazy. So with Mike, I did panto for 2 years. One as the villain, which is Beauty and the Beast. I was playing what's essentially Gaston. And I've got an Elvis wig and a big sparkly jacket, and I thought, and a big sword. I like this. This was fun. And the next year was Dick Whittington, which is a more traditional British folk tale, almost like a version of the American Dream, but based in the 15th century. And I played the Dame. So I'm there with a big pink and white spotted dress and a bonnet and a blonde wig. And a very falsetto voice where I speak like this, you see. And everyone's there. Now, from Mike,
if I may, it's got to cut us off, but
sure, yes, we'll go for whatever.
But I do look forward to part 2. But how can our fans and listeners get in touch with you?
Oh, I'm on Instagram, RichT50. I'm on Facebook, Richard Teasdale. And I think that's the main 2 ways, really. Yes. And
are you on LinkedIn?
I really need to be on LinkedIn, don't I? Especially because I'm about to start my own agency with a couple of friends. We're doing a cooperative acting agency. So I shall send you the link once we're properly set up on there. There's a whole lot of things you have to do to be recognised as an agent in Britain, which is, again, somewhat arcane and strange sounding to those on the outside, but it kind of works. So once we've got that sorted, I shall also share that with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have a couple questions for you off the air. But it's funny you should mention, the whole transgender thing. The Family Guy made a joke. It's like, oh, that's a beautiful woman. That's a man. Oh, that's a handsome man. That's a woman. Oh, that's a dog. And that's a cat. What is everything?
Oh, trust me. I've actually introduced friends from outside of Britain. 3 are American and 2 are Polish. And we introduced them to pantomime, and they were just there going, what is this? And, that's obviously a man in a dress. But they're funny as well. What's going on? And,
you can play that song, Dude Looks Like a Lady.
Yes, exactly. Oh, frequently those ones do turn up. And, yes, but usually the Dame is the most famous person in the company. They usually earn the most because it's what everyone comes to see is the Dame. Currently, Ian McKellen's being Dame in panto at the moment because he'd never done it. And if you look at his Instagram, you can see him dressed as a woman with obviously rouged cheeks. And I recommend you check that out. It might confuse you all further as to exactly what this extremely famous and well thought out British actor's doing dressed like a doll. But I recommend it's to be done just to maybe understand some of what I'm talking about, or maybe go away even more confused than before.
Yeah, absolutely. So this episode will be aired on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, all social medias. I do have a couple questions for you off the air. But wrapping up, for our listeners and viewers, if you're watching, definitely leave a comment. We both would like to interact with that. Until we meet again, catch you later.
Bye-bye now.